Sienna God, hello all. Oshisahiya, good evening, and Wado, thank you for watching. So this is day 1, part B of reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an Inquiry into Values by Robert M. Pirsig. So I ended with, what's new is an interesting and broadening eternal question, but one which is, if pursued exclusively, results only in an endless parade of trivia and fashion, the silt of tomorrow. I would like instead to be concerned with the question, what is best? A question which cuts deeply rather than broadly, a question whose answers tend to move the silt downstream. There are eras of human history in which the channels of thought have been too deeply cut and no change was possible and nothing new ever happened. And, in quotes, best was a matter of dogma, but that is not the situation now. Now the stream of our common consciousness seems to be obliterating its own banks, losing its central direction and purpose, flooding the lowlands, disconnecting and isolating the highlands, and to no particular purpose other than the wasteful fulfillment of its own internal momentum. Some channel deepening seems called for. Up ahead, the other riders, John Sutherland and his wife Sylvia, have pulled into a roadside picnic area. It's time to stretch. As I pull my machine beside them, Sylvia is taking her helmet off and shaking her hair loose while John puts his BMW up on the stand. Nothing is said. We have been on so many trips together, we know from a glance how one another feels. Right now, we are just quiet and looking around. The picnic benches are abandoned at this hour of the morning. We have the whole place to ourselves. John goes across the grass to a cast iron pump and starts pumping water to drink. Chris wanders down through some trees beyond a grassy knoll to a small stream. I am just staring around. After a while, Sylvia sits down on the wooden picnic bench and straightens out her legs, lifting one at a time slowly without looking up. Long silences mean gloom for her, and I comment on it. She looks up and then looks down again. It was all those people in the cars coming the other way, she says. The first one looked so sad, and then the next one looked exactly the same way, and then the next one and the next one, they were all the same. They were just commuting to work. She perceives, well, but there was nothing unnatural about it. Well, you know, work, I repeat. Monday morning, half asleep. Who goes to work Monday morning with a grin? It's just that they look so lost, she says. Like they were all dead, like a funeral procession. Okay. Then she puts both feet down and leaves them there. I see what she is saying, but logically it doesn't go anywhere. You work to live, and that's what they were doing. I was watching swamps, I say. After a while, she looks up and says, what did you see? There was a whole flock of red-winged blackbirds. They rose up suddenly when we went by. Oh. I was happy to see them again. They tie things together, thoughts and such, you know. She thinks for a while, and then with the trees behind her, a deep grin, she smiles. She understands a peculiar language, which has nothing to do with what you are saying. A daughter. Yes, she says, they're beautiful. Watch for them, I say. All right. John appears and checks. It kind of looks like cheeks. John appears and checks the gear on the cycle. He adjusts some of the ropes and then opens the saddlebag and starts rummaging through. He sets some things on the ground. If you ever need any rope, don't hesitate, he says. God, I think I've got about 5 times what I need here. Not yet, I answer. Matches, he says, still rummaging. Sunburn lotion, comb, shoelaces. Shoelaces? What do we need shoelaces for? Let's not start that, Sylvia says. They look at each other, deadpan, and then both look over at me. Shoelaces can break any time, I say solemnly. They smile, but not at each other. Chris soon appears, and it is time to go. While he gets ready and climbs on, they pull out, and Sylvia waves. We are on the highway again, and I watch them gain distance up ahead. The Chautauqua that is in mind for this trip was inspired by these 2 many months ago, and perhaps, although I don't know, is related to a certain undercurrent of disharmony between them. Disharmony, I suppose, is common enough in any marriage, but in their case, it seems more tragic, to me anyway. It's not a personality clash between them. It's something else for which neither is to blame, but for which neither has any solution, and for which I'm not sure I have any solution either, just ideas. The ideas began with what seemed to be a minor difference of opinion between John and me on a matter of small importance. How much one should maintain one's own motorcycle. It seems natural and normal to me to make use of the small toolkits and instruction booklets supplied with each machine and keep it tuned and adjusted myself. John demurs. He prefers to let a competent mechanic take care of these things so that they are done right. Neither viewpoint is unusual, and this minor difference would never have become magnified if we didn't spend so much time riding together and sitting in country roadhouses, drinking beer and talking about whatever comes to mind. What comes to mind usually is whatever we've been thinking about in the half hour or 45 minutes since we last talked to each other. When it's roads or weather or people or old memories or what's in the newspapers, the conversation just naturally builds pleasantly. But whenever the performance of the machine has been on my mind and gets into the conversation, the building stops. The conversation no longer moves forward. There's a silence and a break in the continuity. It is as though two old friends, a Catholic and a Protestant, were sitting drinking beer, enjoying life, and the subject of birth control somehow came up. Big freeze out. And of course, when you discover something like that, it's like discovering a tooth with a missing filling. You can never leave it alone. You have to probe it, work around it, push on it, think about it, not because it's enjoyable, but because it's on your mind and it won't get off your mind. And the more I probe and push on this subject of cycle maintenance, the more irritated he gets. And of course, that makes me want to probe and push all the more. Not deliberately to irritate him, but because the irritation seems symptomatic of something deeper, something under the surface that isn't immediately apparent. When you're talking birth control, what blocks it and freezes it out is that it's not a matter of more or fewer babies being argued. That's just on the surface. What's underneath is a conflict of faith in empirical social planning versus faith in the authority of God as revealed by the teachings of the Catholic Church. You can prove the practicality of Planned Parenthood till you get tired of listening to yourself, and it's going to go on nowhere because your antagonist isn't buying the assumption that anything socially practical is good per se. Goodness for him has other sources, which he values as much as or more than social practicality. So it is with John. I could preach the practical value and worth of motorcycle maintenance till I'm hoarse and it would make not a dent in him. After 2 sentences on the subject, his eyes go completely glassy and he changes the conversation or just looks away. He doesn't want to hear about it. Sylvia is completely with him on this one. In fact, she is even more empathetic. It's just a whole other thing, she says, when in a thoughtful mood. Like garbage, she says, when not. They want not to understand it, not to hear about it. And the more I try to fathom what makes me enjoy mechanical work and them hate it so, the more elusive it becomes. The ultimate cause of this originally minor difference of opinion appears to run way deep. Inability on their part is ruled out immediately. They are both plenty bright enough. Either one of them could learn to tune a motorcycle in an hour and a half if they put their minds and energy to it. And the saving and money and worry and delay would repay them over and over again for their effort, and they know that. Or maybe they don't. I don't know. I never confront them with a question. It's better to just get along. But I remember once outside a bar in Savage, Minnesota, on a really scorching day when I just about let loose. We'd been in the bar for about an hour, and we came out, and the machines were so hot you could hardly get on them. I'm started and ready to go, and there's John pumping away on the Kickstarter. I smell gas like we're next to a refinery and tell him so, thinking it's enough to let him know his engine's flooded. Yeah, I smell it too, he says. Oh, my Lord. And keeps on pumping, and he pumps and pumps and jumps and pumps. And I don't know what more to say. Finally, he's really winded and sweat's running down all over his face and he can't pump anymore. So I suggest taking out the plugs to dry them off and air out the cylinders while we go back for another beer. Oh my God, no. He doesn't want to get into all that stuff. All that stuff? Oh, getting out the tools and all that stuff. There's no reason why it shouldn't start. It's a brand new machine and I'm following the instructions perfectly. See, it's right on full choke like they say. Full choke. That's what the instructions say. That's for when it's cold. Well, we've been there for half an hour at least, he says. It kind of shakes me up. This is a hot day, John, I say, and they take longer than that to cool off on even a freezing day. He scratches his head. Well, why don't they tell you that in the instructions? He opens the choke, and on the second kick, it starts. I guess that was it, he says cheerfully. And the very next day, we were out near the same area, and it happened again. This time I was determined not to say a word, and when my wife urged me to go over and help, I shook my head. I told her that until he had a real felt need, he was just going to resent help. So we went over and sat in the shade and waited. I noticed he was being super polite to Sylvia while he pumped away, meaning he was furious. And she was looking over with a kind of, yeah, gods look. If he had asked any single question, I would have been over in a second to diagnose it, but he wouldn't. It must have been 15 minutes before he got it started. Later, we were drinking beer again over at Lake Minnetonka, and everybody was talking around the table, but he was silent, and I could see he was really tied up in knots inside. After all that time, probably to get them untied, he finally said, you know, when it doesn't start like that, it just really turns me into a monster inside. I just get paranoid about it. This seemed to loosen him up, and he added, they just had this one motorcycle, see, this lemon, and they didn't know what to do with it, whether to send it back to the factory or sell it for scrap or what. And then at the last moment, they saw me coming with $1,800 in my pocket, and they knew their problems were over. In a kind of sing-song voice, I repeated the plea for tuning, and he tried hard to listen. He really tries hard sometimes. But then the block came again, and he was off to the bar for another round for all of us, and the subject was closed. He is not stubborn, not narrow-minded, not lazy, not stupid. There was just no easy explanation, so it was left up in the air, a kind of mystery that one gives up on because there is no sense in just going round and round and round looking for an answer that's not there. It occurred to me that maybe I was the odd one on the subject, but that was disposed of too. Most touring cyclists know how to keep their machines tuned. Car owners usually won't touch the engine, but every town of any size at all has a garage with expensive lifts, special tools, and diagnostic equipment that the average owner can't afford. And a car engine is more complex and inaccessible than a cycle engine, so there's more sense to this. But for John's cycle, a BMW R60, I'll bet there's not a mechanic between here and Salt Lake City. If his points or plugs burn out, he's done for. I know he doesn't have a set of spare points with him. He doesn't know what points are. If it quits on him in western South Dakota or Montana, I don't know what he's going to do. Sell it to the Indians, maybe. Right now, I know what he's doing. He's carefully avoiding giving any thought whatsoever to the subject. The BMW is famous for not giving mechanical problems on the road, and that's what he's counting on. I might have thought this was just a peculiar attitude of theirs about motorcycles, but discovered later that it extended to other things. Waiting for them to get going on one morning in their kitchen, I noticed the sink faucet was dripping and remembered that it was dripping the last time I was there before, and that in fact it had been dripping as long as I could remember. I commented on it, and John said he had tried to fix it with a new faucet washer, but it hadn't worked. That was all he said. The presumption left was that was the end of the matter. If you try to fix a faucet and your fixing doesn't work, then it's just your lot to live with a dripping faucet. This made me wonder to myself if it got on their nerves, the drip, 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 week in, week out, year in, year out, but I could not notice any irritation or concern about it on their part, and so concluded that they just aren't bothered by things like dripping faucets. Some people aren't. What it was that changed this conclusion, I don't remember. Some intuition, some insight one day. Perhaps it was a subtle change in Sylvia's mood whenever the dripping was particularly loud and she was trying to talk. She has a very soft voice, and one day when she was trying to talk above the dripping and the kids came in and interrupted her, she lost her temper at them. It seemed that her anger at the kids would not have been nearly as great if the faucet hadn't also been dripping when she was trying to talk. It was the combined dripping and loud kids that blew her up. What struck me hard then was that she was not blaming the faucet, and that she was deliberately not blaming the faucet. She wasn't ignoring that faucet at all. She was suppressing anger at the faucet and that GD dripping faucet was just about killing her. But she could not admit the importance of this for some reason. Why suppress anger at a dripping faucet, I wondered. Then that patched in with the motorcycle maintenance, and one of those light bulbs went over my head, and I thought, it's not the motorcycle maintenance, not the faucet. It's all the technology they can't take. And then all sorts of things started tumbling into place, and I knew that was it. Sylvia's irritation at a friend who thought computer programming was quote unquote creative. All their drawings and paintings and photographs without a technological thing in them. Of course, she's not going to get mad at that faucet, I thought. You always suppress momentary anger at something you deeply and permanently hate. Of course, John signs off every time the subject of cycle repair comes up, even when it is obvious he is suffering for it. That's technology. And sure, of course, obviously, it is so simple when you see it. To get away from technology out into the country and the fresh air and sunshine is why they are on the motorcycle in the first place. For me to bring it back to them just at that point, at the point and place where they think they have finally escaped it, just frosts both of them tremendously. That's why the conversation always breaks and freezes when the subject comes up. Other things fit in too. They talk once in a while in as few pained words as possible about quote unquote it or quote unquote it all, as in the sentence, there is just no escape from it. And if I ask from what, the answer might be the whole thing or the whole organized bit or even the system. Sylvia once said defensively, well, you know how to cope with it, which puffed me up so much at the time I was embarrassed to ask what quote unquote it was, and so remained somewhat puzzled. I thought it was something more mysterious than technology, but now I see that the quote unquote it was mainly, if not entirely, technology, but that doesn't sound right either. The quote unquote it is a kind of force that gives rise to technology, something undefined but inhuman, mechanical, lifeless, a blind monster, a death force, something hideous they are running from, but no, they can never escape. I'm putting it way too heavily here, but in a less emphatic, in a less emphatic and less defined way, this is what it is. Somewhere there are people who understand it and run it, but those are technologists. And they speak an inhuman language when describing what they do. It's all parts and relationships of unheard of things that never make any sense, no matter how often you hear about them. And their things, their monster keeps eating up land and polluting their air and lakes, and there is no way to strike back at it, and hardly any way to escape it. That attitude is not hard to come to. You go through a heavy industrial area of a large city, and there it all is, the technology. In front of it are high barbed wire fences, locked gates, signs saying no trespassing, and beyond, through city air, you see ugly, strange shapes of metal and brick whose purpose is unknown and whose masters you will never see. What's it for you? Don't know. And why it's there, there's no one to tell, and so all you can feel is alienated, estranged, as though you didn't belong there. Who owns and understands this doesn't want you around. All this technology has somehow made you a stranger in your own land. Its very shape and appearance and mysteriousness say, get out. So I'm going to leave it right there, and I'm going to comment on the fact that when I was reading about this stuff about him knowing like how to repair his motorcycle and being prepared and stuff, like literally, that was Andy. He would literally know whatever it was, and if he didn't, he knew exactly where to find the answer, and then he was able to do it himself. He would not let anything go unfixed. Okay. Anyway, for some reason, I feel like reading it slow, like I'm like laughing through it and like seeing parallels and being reminded of him, being reminded of my dad. Like he was a lot like my dad. Anyway, I just thought that was really, really cool. There's no way he would have let a faucet just drip like that. Yeah, anyhow. All right, don't go hang a good chance. Okay, till we meet again. Love you, mean it. And thanks for listening.